reinforce that they were involved in a crime and they are somehow responsible for that. We believe that the ban on child soldiers then causes those individuals to construct an identity whereby they feel that they are somehow responsible for that evil. They feel that they have been forced into it rather than getting the training and education that we're willing to provide, instead forced into that brutality and thereby complicit in that. We think that's what massively harms their reintegration into society. I'll take closer.
Yeah, so that coercion still exists at the point at which you're forced to join these things at gunpoint, if not by the people that train them, then by the people that are going to kill them.
Like we say that you can get, like we say that there's still a comparative, right? Like it's still better to not, it's still better to be able to defend yourself and then live the kind of life that you want to, rather than being forced to be so what you see as a criminal and forced into being extremely brutal. We do see that there is a benefit on our side of the house. Admittedly, it's imperfect, and some people might say that the counter-prop didn't, that the prop from the government didn't help. Still, it's better than the situation we see in the status quo, and therefore is something that we should be doing, right? Like, just because it's not the optimal situation, it is something that's beneficial. Right, our extension. You know, we say that it's not generally in the interest of most of these actors to brutalise population and brutalise children per se, right? Because the two types of constituencies we see recruiting child soldiers are either insurgent movements or the government, right? First of all, in terms of insurgent movements, they are entirely reliant on popular support. The time at which they tend to recruit child soldiers is the point of desperation, in which they don't want to brutalise and thereby alienate the population. They want to try and engage, but because of the ban, they're unable to go through conventional mechanisms like things like payment. No thanks, and there's no ability for these groups to resist. Second of all, governments. We said that often governments are ideological and don't want to engage in these kinds of tactics, but feel forced to because of the lack of available adults in order to be able to do this. No, we think that, and they don't want to drive the population away from that cause. They are essentially forced into it because there is no availability of conventional or regulated mechanisms to be able to do so. No, there is no ability for these children to defend themselves. Like, sit down! Right? So we say that often the use of brutal tactics, kidnap and murder, are desperation measures forced to do bad stuff in order to be able to recruit because of a shortage of individuals. We say we often can get meaningful, like, I'm not, no, like, go away. Happy birthday. Recognise that there is a political capital bonus in terms of treating individuals well, but they recognise they're not able to do that because they have to hide them from the ban. Second of all, we see that the ban leads to tactics of ostracism. First of all, there is a huge incentive to dispose of children at the end of this so they can't go back and tell about what happened. We think it's a big problem that children tend to be killed at the end of this. You remove that incentive at the point at which there isn't an international ban on it. Second of all, there is a huge incentive to indoctrinate in the most brutal way, to make them complicit in war crimes in order that they feel they can never go and tell anybody about what happened because you knew that you were doing this kind of thing. Thirdly, there is no possibility to be able to give aid to many of these most vulnerable constituencies, right? Often child soldiers are the ones most in need of things like the Red Cross, things like food packages, or things like other kinds of training mechanisms. There is no incentive, there is a positive disincentive at the point at which there is a ban for any actor to allow access to aid for these children, because guess what? It tends to reveal that you have child soldiers working for you. We think in that situation, we remove an awful lot of that disincentive because we allow these institutions to, first of all, protect soldiers, which ultimately both sides have an interest in doing, and second, it means that you're not going to have to reveal that you are complicit in flouting an international ban, assuming it exists, which the prop does. So, what we told you from side closing, we've told you that this allows individuals with an opportunity to defend themselves that wouldn't otherwise exist. On a comparative analysis, that is better. Second, we have told you that this leads to an amelioration of these kinds of tactics of brutalisation and leads to a better quality of life for those children who become child soldiers anyway. This ban is spectacularly ineffective, as was evidenced by the long stream of examples that Harish gave you of where child soldiers are being used. We want to try and protect and preserve their quality of life. I'm very happy to stand with them.
Speaker, Emily Ravenscroft, opening for Llewellyn.
Madam Speaker, ladies and gentlemen, I am most honored to stand before you today representing closing opposition and also representing the great country of Ireland. I also find it perfectly understandable that as a representative of the country of Ireland, it is left to me to explain to the English teams what justice is. Madam Speaker, a good war, a just war, is not about do people die, but it is the question of who dies. If you cannot win without child soldiers, you ought not fight this war.
Hear, hear.
Or you ought to die fighting
hear.
this war. We don't think that they give you any reasons why this is not true. I'm going to engage in just a bit of rebuttal when I talk about self-defense and the bastardization of that standard according to legal jurisprudence. I'm then going to talk to you about the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child and how it articulates specific rights. I'm going to talk to you about why the international community has the right to make laws and standards and group children across the board into these standards, why we don't think it's experientially or culturally situated. And finally, I'm going to talk to you about what is the result of international law. Briefly, just a little bit of rebuttal in terms of self-defense. Jus in bello, how one must act in war, has 3 levels, the third of which is military necessity. When they try to couch this as self-defense, Madam Speaker, this is not what a soldier is, right? A soldier is engaged in active attack. Otherwise, ladies and gentlemen, all of our soldiers would probably be sitting on America's borders right now shooting AK-47s in the air rather than raping Iraqis, right? We think that the point at which you articulate that as a legal standard, as self-defense as a legal standard, is the point at which you permit morally reprehensible behavior. We think you try to put this burden on the opposition by saying you must reject a child's right to self-defense is absolutely inappropriate to this debate and it's shifting of burdens. No thank you. Self-defense is limited jurisdictionally to prevent it from being used unacceptably to engage in unacceptable action. For example, if you hit me in the face, I can't shoot you 2 weeks later.
Here, here.
Jurisdictionally for these reasons, right? We think it is interpreted, particularly in international law, relatively conservatively to avoid the standard. Time is key. At that point, that's opening government gone, and now I'm going to talk to you about why closing government doesn't get it either. The United Nations Conventions on the Right of the Child articulates the following rights. 1, the right to survival. 2, the right to develop to the fullest. 3, protection from harmful influences, abuse, and exploitation. That's right, I'm an American, I case file. Ladies and gentlemen, the right to survival, they fundamentally deny the child's right to